Here we are, back with the Independent Republic of Mike Graham. And now a Tory civil war is looming on the horizon as Suella Braverman defends against Rishi's reshuffle offensive. She's gone scorched earth with a blistering letter attacking Rishi's weak leadership. Someone called a medic because he's certainly wounded. And I'm now joined by my panel for the night, journalist Georgia Gilholy, Deputy Political Editor at The Sun, Ryan Savey, and political commentator Emma Wolfe. Welcome to all of you on a pretty auspicious night for news, it has to be said. Let me start with you, Emma, because we were going to say today, well, I wonder what the fallout's going to be from Suella Braverman and when she's going to say the things that she says she's going to say. Well, we didn't have to wait long.
This letter is amazing.
Isn't it?
I could reread this letter again and again and again. And then the front pages come up. I know we're not talking about them yet, but the front page of the Daily Mail has a photo of Suella leaving her house looking so happy, so cheeky, so she's loving her life. And this letter, as a writer, I know this letter is far too long. As a leaving letter to the PM, it's too long. But it's not. There's so much. Every time you reread it, it just gives more. It's the gift that keeps on giving. And yeah, I mean, it's full of dagger blows to the back and all of that stuff, but it's also full of really important information about just how dysfunctional their relationship was. It raises questions, really serious questions about, well, obviously Sunak's future, but also why were they working together when they were literally, the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister were clearly had a totally dysfunctional relationship in terms of the priorities, in terms of the very, very important priorities for this country.
It sounds as though he was by and large ignoring her. I mean,
Magical
Ryan,
thinking.
Yeah, I mean, if Sunak thought that he would move her off the front pages by appointing David Cameron, it's rather backfired a bit, hasn't it?
Yeah, totally. I think that lasted for about 12 hours and then we're straight back into Suella Braverman. Now, she was choosing a moment for maximum impact and she's absolutely done it. Tomorrow morning you have the Rwanda announcement as well. She's timed it to try and grab that sort of overnight sort of headline. So she seems to have done a pretty good job. She released this letter about 5 o'clock this evening, straight onto the newspaper headlines, which everyone's going to be talking about all night. And it's just the language. They say as a journalist, never waste a word. She certainly hasn't wasted a word in this 1,300-word letter. Talks about betrayal of the Prime Minister, not living up to his promises. And they struck a deal. The only way that she claims that she gave her support to him during that leadership campaigns, they struck a deal. Things about he would get rid of the Brexit laws, he would stick to his immigration plans. And she says he hasn't stuck to that. But you wonder why. There's lots of things in there that she says that Rishi Sunak hasn't stuck to. Why has it taken her so long? Why didn't she walk out the door? Because she could have done.
Well, she could have done. Georgia, I guess there are those who will say this is her kind of first shot fired as claimed to be the new leader. Do you see it that way, or do you see it just as her taking revenge?
I think, of course, on some of the issues, I understand why she's passionate. I would agree with her on some of the issues. Doesn't necessarily mean she's leadership material, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the Conservative Party is the party to lead the country. And I think also there's obviously the old phrase, you know, the person who wields a knife never usually wears the crown. I think that could be the case for Suella. I think also when it comes to reduce immigration, there are, you know, majority of the public is behind that really, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they find Suella Braverman particularly likeable. Also, the focus on the small votes, I understand why that's a huge issue, and obviously we have, you know, the Supreme Court decision coming out tomorrow, but the reality is, you know, last year we had 600k net migration. Vast majority of that is not to do with the small votes. It's illegal migration. It's a deliberate decision by the government. I think raising that more highly, focusing on that should have been her priority. I understand why the small votes issue is, I suppose, something more. But
she says in the letter that he promised, and I think this is right, Emma, she says in the letter that he promised to reduce the numbers of people coming on student visas and on the work visas, which is a large bulk.
I mean, he promised a lot
that.
of things.
But this is the thing. So if she's saying that, look, I talked to you about this, I told you what you should do, you didn't do any of it.
And can I just tell you, when she goes for the jugular, in her third paragraph, she says, despite you having been rejected by a majority of party... She's just, you know, kindly reminding him, despite you having been rejected by a majority of party members during the summer leadership contest, and thus having no personal mandate to be Prime Minister, by the way, he's absolutely brilliant. And I don't know about her. I know about her becoming Prime Minister, even though it seems unlikely because she's not been becoming the leader of the party. Certainly not Prime Minister. Even though she's not been a popular figure, I think it might be one of those moments when someone just comes to the fore. Because I think over the past week, actually, since her letter about policing, since her article about policing and the wokery and the nonsense there, in the Times. People love Suella. People who didn't like her much, I didn't like her much, are saying this woman knows whereof she speaks.
Well, she does speak
she's
for a lot of
risen
people.
on a wave and she's going for it.
Brian, you're in and out of the Westminster bubble all day. I mean, what are you hearing? What are people saying? It seems like there's a split in the Tory party for those who are feeling like they have to back Sunak because he's their leader, but those who still think that Suella Braverman was right.
Yeah, there is. Speaking to one Tory MP on the right wing of the party, he really says that Sunak, with the way that he dealt with that cabinet, appointed David Cameron, he's almost trying to purge the right of the party. And when it comes to tomorrow with this Supreme Court judgment, if it goes the wrong way for the government, you're going to get a swell of Tory MPs calling to leave this European Convention of Human Rights, and they all go for Rishi Sunak pretty hard and hold his feet to the fire and try and at least get some sort of derogation or some sort of exit clause to at least ignore those asylum cases, which was what Suella Braverman was asking for.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, now they have someone to unite around, don't they? They really have a figurehead.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think whether she becomes leader or not depends on which MPs come back after the next election. Yeah. Are they going to be from the left of the party or the right of the party? But you are going to have a candidate emerge from the right. It's either going to be probably Suella Braverman or Kemi Badenoch, and they're going to be up against one of the on the left wing of the party, whether that's Penny Mordaunt or perhaps Gillian Keegan to come from...
It's the same old problem, isn't it, though? Civil war all over again, Georgia. I mean, we've got now a poll tonight in which it shows that Reform, for the first time, are up to 11%, only 8 points behind the Tories, which could be pretty disastrous for them, even more so. Now 30 points behind Labour. I mean, is there any hope for them, as far as you can see?
I think with first past the post, smaller parties will always have, you know, a hard time, even though, of course, you know, in the lead up to Brexit, we obviously had lots of people voting UKIP, which sort of put pressure on the Tories. But we could have a situation where Labour go into coalition with the Lib Dems, something along those lines. They are pressured to enact proportional representation. That will completely change our political system forever. And I think, actually, it will, in the long term, probably boost more populist, more right-wing parties, especially if issues like immigration seem to sort of go, you know, unsolved.
Yeah, I mean, they're talking about possibly having the same number of votes as UKIP did that time, when they only won one seat, and they were all moaning that, you know, they had a much bigger share of the vote than they actually got at the end of the day.
But one thing, if you're the Conservatives, you would worry about, particularly in those marginal seats, where it's a Lib Dem-facing seat, or you are up against Labour. If you only have 2 or 3% peel off towards that Reform Party, you can lose a hell of a lot of seats very, very quickly.
Absolutely right. Emma, a lot of people have been messaging into us tonight saying that Suella should just leave the Tory party, go and join Reform and start a new kind of, you know, stronger right-wing party and leave the Conservatives to drown in their own mediocrity.
Front of the Times, she's wearing a bright red suit, so it looks like she's definitely leaving the True Blue party. I mean, that suit is a colour. It is. Message, Mike.
It is. Is that a message? Is that a sort of womanly thing to do then, to wear a colour, to go, this is what I'm doing?
She thinks about her clothes. She thinks about what she puts on, especially at this stage. And she just looks relieved and happy and liberated. She looks like the woman who's left a very, very unhappy marriage.
And Rishi Sunak, I mean, is the bad guy in this. DB says Sunak is a fearful hypocrite who nobody will hopefully remember in 50 years. He was scared of facing the truth, and these people aren't usually appreciated long term. Well said, Suella, says Les. We all know none of the two main parties want to stop illegal migrants or reduce legal migrants. So what does Rishi Sunak do about this, Ryan? Does he respond to it? Does he pretend it wasn't there? He's going to get hit at Prime Minister's questions, presumably tomorrow.
Totally, but he will say, you know, if he didn't sack her, he'd get accused of being weak. He's actually done something about it. But this sort of... lots of people say the Conservatives, they're going to lose.
But he cancelled it out. He cancelled it out. He got rid of Suella and they brought it... I mean, he did it. In fact, it wasn't a cancelling out. It was a... It was a double whammy.
Yeah.
It was awful. Got rid of Suella.
Right.
I mean, who is advising? We know that Rishi Sunak's political judgment is basically zero.
Right.
But who... Does he not have political advisors around him?
I think he does.
But
they don't know anything.
No, but they're saying, this is really good, this is a really good strategy, we'll bring back David Cameron. But do they not have advisors who also kind of wargame it and say, but what if the alternative scenario? What if it wasn't so good? It really is alarming that he doesn't have people kind of
I'm not sure
thinking about the
Ryan can tell us.
I think they've worked out, there's a calculation going on in Downing Street right now by bringing by getting rid of Suella Braverman, bringing David Cameron, those Tory up against Lib Dem seats, you've got more of a chance of winning. And they think they can just be a bit of a more of an assured position. But that's their calculation.
Yeah.
It may unravel very, very quickly.
I think it will.
But you look at Rishi Sunak over the coming 10 days. You've got the Rwanda decision tomorrow that could go his way, or some of it could go his way. You've got inflation figures out that should hit his target of reducing inflation by half. And next week you could have an autumn statement that could be relatively successful. So it's one of those pivotal moments.
Yeah. It's quite a big moment, isn't it? Because those three things could either sink him or get him to actually get to the next stage, which is basically beyond Christmas at this point. I mean, I think that's how serious it is for him.
I think it is. And speaking to MPs tonight over in the House of Commons, what you don't want to do, you only need 53, I think it's maybe 56 MPs to put letters in before there's a vote of confidence.
Here we go again.
The letters are starting.
Absolutely. What you don't want to do is stumble into that, because there's a vote of confidence. He will win it, but he'll be severely damaged.
Yeah, absolutely right.